XR at Work is back. Who do we got today? Scott and
Dane.
Dane and
Mark.
We got Mark. Guys, we've got a friend. It's not Dane and I just talking to each other. So Mark, welcome, man. It's good to see you. We haven't done an episode yet with anyone from Atlanta. So I got someone on my side here to gang up against Dane.
All right. Yeah.
So, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing. We're super glad to have you on the podcast today and see what we can learn from you, my friend.
Sure. No, it was a pleasure. I was excited, Scott. Not for nothing, I've watched a few episodes, so this is good. My name is Mark Grob. I run the Immersive Tech Center at UPS, which is really sort of, I'm the guy when it comes to XR inside of UPS globally. Before that, I've worked in a variety of startups around VR, XR. I've been at this game for a long time. I'm looking back. Before we started, I mentioned 1998. I was an intern for BAE writing OpenGL and Reality Engine code. So, I've been in it for a while, and it's kind of cool that some of our passions now are becoming cool again. So, I'm excited to talk about it.
What do you think about all this, man? I mean, Dan and I talk about this, you've seen kind of a lot of the different stages and the progression of what we've been going through. I mean, you like where we're going? You think we're headed in the right direction? Are you excited? Do you think we're all kind of, getting distracted by things? What's your take?
Well, I think it's kind of exciting when you look at it from the standpoint of enterprise, right? I think it's exciting because VR specifically is much more mature. The technology is always sort of going in cycles. It used to be 7 years, went down to 5 years. Now we're about 2 years. Every 2 years, the technology cycles up again. So it's exciting. The non-exciting parts of it is when certain brands decide to, make it their own and overhype the technology, or sort of, try to make a word something where, now it's encompassing 30 different technologies. That is where I get more concerned, because I look back to the days, late 90s, where VRML, which is very similar and sort of was answering the same problems we're now talking about with metaverse. But, it sort of went through the hype cycle. That to me is where I'm more concerned, because as you guys probably know, at the workplace, right? Enterprise, it's really about, thoroughly thought through technology, practically looking at something, not just looking at hype. Because in the end, you really kind of want it to produce value, create, something productive and good for your business, right? So some trends are very cool, right? But it's disconcerting, because what's the life, right? Hype is nice to a point, but in the standpoint of when you look at enterprise, hype's not a good thing. Usually it just creates risk and opens up your business to something. So,
Well, so something that I'm interested in, you having been in this space for so long, is, it's really difficult to predict where this thing is going, right? Or like what's going to be very pragmatic in the next 1 year versus 5 years, et cetera. So I'm interested, looking back on your career, from the beginning, like, were there things that you were like, this is for sure going to be the future of this space, and it ended up falling apart? And then were there things that surprised you, coming up in the space that you're like, that's way far out, and then all of a sudden, it pops up and it's useful?
Oh yeah. So this is a great question. So ideas like 360-degree operating systems, right? In the early 2000s, I actually did a startup for it, and we very quickly learned. And there was a very high-profile gentleman that said to me, people don't pay for enhancements. So if we look at VR or XR in the sense of, is it just an enhancement, right? A lot of those have come and gone, and for me, one of the lessons learned was, I had high expectations, like, oh, this is a no-brainer, right? But there's a dependence when it's an enhancement for a bigger industry or a bigger market, right? So in the case, say, operating systems or device makers, right? So a lot of those, it was, oh, this is a no-brainer, and then those kind of played into, the every 5-year, 7-year cycle thing. But then there was the other interesting stuff where when I first started, things like teleimmersion, right? The whole virtual things we're doing right now, right? At the time, perceptually, I was like, oh, this is more, a requirement to do what we want to see, or what that no-brainer was. But what's interesting is that those are the things that actually carried forward. The fact of, streaming video over IP has just come such a long way from, RTMSP, peer-to-peer links and stuff like that for, medical sessions or something like that in some sort of 360 video, solution, and those were crazy things that we were looking at back in like 2008. Now with, COVID and things like that, they're more realistic, right? But still, when we talk about XR, right, it's about immersion. So, it still needs to move ahead, right? There's still a lot of barriers that we have to deal with, from a pragmatic standpoint, right?
Right.
But like the VR headsets, to me, for training and things like that, they've been a no-brainer since, early 2000. And it's nice to see that. I think in the industrial markets, the logistics markets, people are really starting to wake up to the value of the power of VR training, the ability to click a button instead of having to have a designated room to do all this training and then take up the time of some mentor, to do that training. Now it's a case of you click a button, that mentor is now training, hundreds of people in a virtual space. Huge cost savings, big bonuses, accelerants for your business. So to me, long term, right, it was a no-brainer, but it's nice now to see that, with time, it's now something that's just, to most people, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
So Mark, what do you think? How much of it do you think is that the case that we now have this younger workforce? We have Gen Z who is fully digital natives. They've had devices in their hands since they were born. How much of it do you think is the generational thing that where it's starting to become table stakes to have XR in the training realm in enterprise? I mean, has that certainly accelerated that? What have you seen?
I don't know if I want to play the millennial card on it. I would say it's more a generational change in the markets. The fact that now in sort of these traditional businesses, things have now become decentralized. The fact that the old adage of you got a job somewhere and you stayed there forever, now culturally no one expects that. It's really sort of, now it's the gig, right? It's the gig concept. I would say more so those aspects to a business is why the technology is becoming more relevant versus kind of the traditional way where you were expected to come in, you'd work at a job, they would train you with a mentor for 3 months and then you're married, right? That doesn't happen anymore. Now everyone has the expectations of the first day you come into the office or that job, right, they expect you to be productive, right? Because otherwise it's time lost and all those other things. I think those factors in market is really what's driving it.
That makes sense. So we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago internally at work. We're saying how used to be, you're gonna consume the first 3, 6, 9 months on a job, and then you're gonna start producing. When you're only probably in this gig economy, right? Like we were talking about, you're only going to be around. Probably you got a lifespan of maybe 2, maybe 3 years at a company. You need to be producing a lot quicker than typical. So that training cycle and that getting productive point needs to be faster. And I certainly feel like XR enables that, lets us get productive quicker and not sit in and read, paper training manuals for 6 months or work side by side with someone before we get productive.
Yeah, I mean, one way to also think about it is before I used to work at UPS, I did entertainment and gaming. And one of the big things in the gaming market was, when you went to work for a AAA studio, you were expected the first day you walked in, first you signed the NDA, and the next thing was, you got to coding or doing that 3D work right away, right? Because their assumption was you were already the expert. You needed to produce, from day one, or as my experience when I joined UPS was the first day I was already running, right? Any good employer, right? That's their ideal employee, is you have that relationship. And I think, we look at what XR devices are now providing is the idea of, traditionally at a place like UPS, maybe there's a 3-week period that, you would expect a package handler before, to learn before they're productive. Now, the concept is maybe a week, right? Maybe a week, right? Because it's just a case of, they need people. And the reality is now, right, with COVID, right, it's hard to get people. So what do you have to do? You have to, you have to engage them and you have to retain them. And the nice thing about XR platforms, specifically VR training, is it is engaging. It is something that people are going to have confidence after they go through, the set curriculum, right? When they have an immersive environment that's equivalent to the real job, right? And they don't have the fears of doing something wrong that first day. How many stories, or I don't know about you guys, but when I was in like high school or, college, junior college, right? You go to that job and, you're working, you're learning the job, right? And you flip the burger wrong. And the next thing you know, the manager says, get out, right? And then, at that point you're fired, right? So that stress, right, of the scenario, that's a big thing. So the nice thing about XR is that stress is gone, right? Because they know they're not directly impacting the business, the dollar for the day, right? It's really just a case of, they're given that environment to learn, right?
I think it's interesting that your point about society trending towards decentralization. I mean, you see even blockchain, is a big discussion in like the metaverse space, and how you have these transactions digitally, or digital property. I actually think that that's one of the bigger kind of metaverse use cases for for businesses. It's that, like, it's going to be harder and harder to find talent that is wanting to localize wherever the headquarters is. If you can create a situation where people can connect, and you can have the culture be homogenous and all that stuff at a distance, then I mean that's a huge value for any large company for any company that's trying to build a workforce and do all that stuff. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, on that presence and metaverse.
I've been thinking about that lately, because I saw like at a trade show, this company that allows for, if you don't have enough forklift drivers in your facility, right, you can have someone remote at a console operate the forklifts in your plant from where they're at. So you can kind of have this decentralized talent, right? They don't have to be in your city, in your factory. They can work in your plant from where they're at, from their home at a computer, some of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's a response to some of this, like we talk about with the labor shortage and people not wanting to relocate, right? I mean, I think it's starting to get interesting.
Well, I mean, the cool thing, right, about decentralization is it's proved the idea of the value, the KPI of remote expert, right? So what you're describing, right, it's that generic remote expert use case, but for a specific industry, right? The ability to have that capability, right? It's an accelerant. The whole idea goes back to that whole engagement, confidence, and consistency, right? That's what you want in sort of your traditional businesses, right? And the use case of remote expert, right? You see what I see, kind of like in the old IT days of remote desktop, right? But it's for operations, it's for a business, right? That's a huge value. Someone doesn't have to fly anymore, right? It's just a case of, either you're stuck in a queue waiting for that expert, or, right, the person's on and they're there. That's a huge value when all of a sudden you could say, hey, and one of the adages models we're following now is, um, uh, 0 errors first time all the time, right? And remote expert is a type of tool that really can provide that. The idea of in logistics, right? You don't want to missort, right? You don't want to send something to the wrong place, right? That is a little different than, say, remote expert. That's about repetition. That's about people understanding, kind of getting that quote mental muscle reflex to do the job, right? So, remote expert is more of a corrector, right, for the moment, right? But how a particular business does that concept of remote expert, right, can be drastically different, hardware platforms and things like that. But now the technology is there that does support it, right? And some would argue it's been there for 5 years.
Right. Well, so I'm interested, from your perspective, what are some of the more valuable use cases? You see, I was just at AWE a couple weeks ago, and you see all kinds of use cases, and you're walking through the expo, and it's like all this stuff is really exciting, but it's the hard part from a business perspective is you don't know until you try, right? And so one of the things that we're trying to do with X Artwork is kind of share where we've had successes, and then also kind of maybe genres of failures along the way, so that rising tide raises all boats kind of thing, and trying to learn together. So what would you say the most successful use cases are that you guys have had? Remote assist sounds like one.
Even before UPS, right? The whole concept of just VR training, that synthetic, repeatable, click of a button environment. It's a huge business case because it's just so wide in the area of quote education, right, within a business. So that's like I would say it's just that's the no-brainer, and it's one of those things where it used to be a competitive advantage, and I think more and more now it's not, because everyone's starting to learn that. The other good business case is collaboration. So either in designing products or services, having the ability to have a virtual space, so say through VR or through in the field combo type stuff, the value of having that collaborative space, it's just huge in sense of time saving. Our teams use really advanced CAD systems to sort of simulate and produce these large facilities that they build, right? And they're doing that now in real time in VR, right? That's a huge time saver because you're not using real material, you're using virtual material, right? And the ability to have the engineers to the site safety people all sort of go into an immersive space to do site reviews, it's huge, because now it's a case of you not going on the site. So that would be like the second big one. For us, the one that specific to logistics is huge is obviously what we call last mile. So the idea of doing data visualization of where the physical thing needs to go in the standpoint of geospatial is huge, because it has implications of also, well, what happens when we replace the human, right? What happens when it's roboticized, right? That last mile technology through augmentation, digital twins, and stuff like that, right? That's huge because who says a human has to use it, right? It could be a machine that uses it. Right. So that's another big area that for my group we're constantly trying to evolve, and we work with our advanced tech group on that. So it's real interesting. I mean, those would be kind of the top three. And then the other aspects that I foresee that are going to be really hot is going to be the idea of virtual services. So if you're somebody in the logistics business and you need the ability to talk to a commodities or customs agent that's a specialist in that field for a region, right? XR is kind of that place. I mean, think about it. You don't have to, go down to the border to get support for it. You just can go to a virtual mall, right, and say, hey, I want to ship, big ship containers to the Middle East from US, right? And it may be the first time that business is doing it, right? The value of having somebody there, that remote expert there, is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be a big trending one as well. I mean, some people might say that relates to the metaverse, but to me, it's more a case of just, you're decentralizing your workforce, and you're now monetizing or creating services to generate revenue for it.
Mark, are you doing anything with like BIMs, with building information modeling in collaborative spaces with engineers and that sort of thing? Have you guys got to that point? We have not, but it's something I've been.
Yeah, I have a group. They're our base team at UPS, and that's exactly the type of things that they do.
So I think you're talking about your team, and a question that I get frequently when we talk to folks who are new, getting into the space, or they're tasked with bringing XR to their business, is they say, can I do this myself, or do I need a team, or all that stuff? Like, what kind of guidance would you give to somebody? And it's different for you, right? That's been around for a while versus somebody who's new, probably. But like, what kind of guidance would you give somebody that asks,
That's a tough question, because it's going to relate to the size of the business, kind of what the available resources are, right? You look at these large Fortune 500s, those types of things. I mean, their initial response is get consultants, right?
Yep.
But the one piece of advice that luckily I believe my organization is hearing is you still got to have 30 to 40% of that owned by the organization, right? It's easy to say, oh, consulting firm A, come in and build a practice for us, right? They'll build the practice for you, lickety split and spend millions of dollars, but it doesn't have legs. Is it going to continue moving? My advice would be, right, it's look at your business. That was my thing when I came to UPS in 2017, was look at our business. What's important, right? Business comes first, and rationally looking at what the proper business cases are for your business, solving the problems around decentralization, the real business problems, and looking at XR as just simply platforms or tools or technology that can assist in solving that problem. That's the big thing. In the sense of scale and, can one person do it? In any organization, I would say the answer there is no. You're never going to be able to do it yourself. You need a team. You need subject matter experts in the business, right? I'm a cool tech guy. I know, I can dissect why a piece of hardware is bad, right? Or how a technology stack's not going to work right to scale for enterprise, right? But that's not going to create value. What's going to create value is when the business people, the stakeholders, the owners of that come in and they are, they understand and they can actually utilize the technology in a way, right? So can one person do it? No. It's going to be a case of our strategy has been, we are educating business users on the technology every day, right? And then we're also kind of with one eye looking to the future and seeing how things are changing, right? Because XR is a huge market. It's constantly changing. VR is more mature. And from an enterprise standpoint, that's easier to deploy and to utilize than AR. AR is it's more niche, and because of limitations with the hardware, right? You're kind of matching the hardware to the business problem, right? And then that's how you're seeing value. And you're going to hear that, you hear the same statement from, all your hardware vendors and stuff like that as well.
Right.
But having someone internally, who quote owns it, right? Who evangelize it, that's important, because otherwise you're going to get the paperweight. It's going to be, a great consulting firm comes in and says, hey, this is what you need. And, you'll build it with them. But if there's no one there to own it, right? A business group to own it, right? I've been lucky. We have Intergrad and other L&D groups that own the VR training. I don't manage that, right? I just do the CMSs and LMSs and device management and MDM stuff for them. But creating the content, right? It's a case of we've educated them on tools to create it, right? So you're never going to be able to be one person to do it. Maybe in a small business to small business relationship, maybe, but for large organizations, it's a long-term trek, and it's a case of it's going to start with education, and it's going to start with not just one person, but the business people wanting to take stake and skin in the game.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I would say is like the guidance I always give people is like, you don't need to hire a bunch of developers on your team. You need to go out in the field and meet people, and then get them excited about it and recruit them to your team, even if it's not 100% of their time or something like that. When you're getting started, because it's hard to go to leadership and say, hey, I need a team of 5 people, when there's nothing to show for it yet. And so that's the guidance that I always give, is like, go and recruit people. And then, by the way, recruiting people that are actually going to be using the tool is how you make good tools. So
my most successful cases actually come from people in the field.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
The Intergrad solutions that we do for VR training, that came from instructors in the field saying, hey, I saw this Oculus Rift thing, or I saw the Vive, the Vive, original Vive headset. Wouldn't it be great if we had a driving simulator for it? Right. That's how the discussion started. It was a case of people in the field saying, we're spending $3 million for a one-to-one, it's actually about $8 million for a one-to-one, Boeing 747 barn simulator, right? What if we took VR and we attached the devices to our flat panel simulators, right? That wasn't me saying that. That was a aviation instructor saying, why aren't we utilizing this technology more, right? Those go back to the concept of, right, it's the business owner. They have to have stake. They have to have ownership. Once you have that, right, then it's easier to go up to senior management, and then senior management say, well, how much money is it going to cost? How much money are we going to save? What's the time? All this other great KPI questions they're going to ask, right? But by having the business person owning it, those are the people that make the project successful. You're just simply, I describe it, you're the evangelist. I consider myself a developer, right? I'm just simply developing the solution. They're going to run it. They're going to own it.
Mark, as you look across, so on XR Work, we talk a lot about industrial or ruggedized environments, oil and gas, automotive, aerospace, manufacturing, utilities. But as you look across even healthcare and education and all the different industries that XR certainly can have a seat at the table in, right, and have an impact on, what are you most excited about? What do you think is maybe an untapped area that XR hasn't had its shining moment in yet? Or do you feel like we're playing at the level we should in kind of all the above?
This is a tricky one to answer. One, I got to think about what I can and can't say.
Okay.
And 2, I think, you look at things like medical, you look at things like remote operation, things of those nature, right? As the technology gets better, those become more and more viable, right? Less risk, more possibilities, more profitability, right, from the standpoint of business. Logistics and things of that nature, right? I think a lot of those markets, a lot of these big businesses were doing it. And a lot of them are doing it for years, and they're being hush-hush, and they're not talking about it because it's a competitive advantage, right? In the socially driven businesses, right, talking about it makes money because it makes clicks, right? But in traditional businesses like logistics, defense, aviation, all these places, talking about it doesn't make money, right? It's doing it is making money. And it's more about how it is engineered to look at the business, right? That to me is enterprise XR, right? Markets that, haven't benefit from it. I foresee as the hardware, the technology gets more stable, more secure, right? Not leaking a lot of data, but it's more secure. People trust it, right? Yeah. Then some of these markets like medicine, it becomes more and more viable. It's the age-old story. when you pick up that device, how much do you trust it?
Yeah.
Right. I use the idea of you're a professional in your field, right? And you're in that field to be profitable, productive, save lives, whatever it may be. Your tools assist you with that, right? So when you look at the tool, right, it's like a surgeon looking at a scalpel, right? How much does that surgeon trust the scalpel, right? Is XR at that level yet? Nah, I don't think so, but it's getting there, right? And I think when you look at certain business sectors, that's really where the question lies, is its adoption is going to be based on the confidence that the business owners in those areas have towards the technology. And unfortunately, there is a history. And in the history, a lot of them have been bit in their butt. Yep. And, they're going to be more resistant to do it. I would say on a weekly basis, I have to, fight people's resistance against the idea of, the latest VR all-in-one devices to some users are going to be the same experience as a cardboard, right? We know that's not the case, but to them it is.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to gain confidence, create the engagement, and give them the consistency that, they need. And I think all those things, sort of go back to that question, well, what sectors, what areas are underserved? Well, in some senses, all of them, because the technology is not, in my opinion, stable enough where I have the confidence to say, hey, I bet my life on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I think also the ecosystem of things interoperating, like it has to develop a lot more. Well, so like a great example, I sent it to Scott yesterday and I was really excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
ABB just released a video where they have their robotic arm and this person has a HoloLens on and they use the HoloLens to move the arm around and to pick up a block and to move it. That's so much better than like a traditional like PLC or ways that you might interact with like a robot arm. And so I think examples like that where if I can walk up to a robotic arm that I'm supposed to be diagnosing and scan a QR code, and then now all of a sudden my movements or I can move that arm around and help me navigate that instead of having to type in coordinates or use some graphical interface. I mean, that's incredible. And so to your point, like I think both the hardware, like nobody wants to wear this, I don't know, it's probably not 5 pounds, several pound, headset on their head for 14 hours a day and all these things. So I think the hardware needs to get better, but I also think the ecosystem of kind of interoperability and software needs to improve in order, to see that kind of the trust, to your point, like that it's robust enough for us to trust that, in those use cases.
Yeah, no, and in that, right, that's where in my role now, right, the biggest challenge every day is, right, because it's about the trust is created by the experience, right? So it's really about what's the experience, is it, how relevant is it to the business, right? The idea of, you're saying the robotic hand, right, and that specific use case, right? It's huge because now the experience is so much easier. You don't have to write coordinates. Now it's a case of, the robot arm has had some preliminary machine learning so that its servos and motions are more smooth and natural, right? Maybe that technology that they used for that algorithm was also improved because maybe they were using VR, human interaction to help model that, right? So again, it boils back to the experience, right? So as these experiences develop, right, they are getting better, right? And then with that, as things are getting better, business is learning to trust, the technology more. So cool.
Yeah, I think I run into this a lot, like in my day job, where when I show up to these shared services within our company, right? So like endpoint management or, identity management or security with my, crazy damn device that they're like, what the heck is this? I mean, there's this level of kind of like, hey, we don't know what you're doing, Scott. And that's a little nuts, right? And we're not so sure we want to attach that into our systems, right? So there's even this level of mistrust, even still within like shared services within our enterprise, where I'm kind of seen as representing some risky, crazy, kooky thing that now I want people to start helping me with some interoperability. And it's like, yeah, it's still early on with a lot of that. People don't trust it.
Yep, and that's because they have prior experiences, right? So it may have been that they said, hey, we don't want this device to have connectivity in sort of the proper organizational space, right? So it may be a case where you need the strategy of educating, and also a strategy of maybe the initial answer is, well, you have testing environments, right? Well, what if, we run these on this environment?
Yeah.
Right. In our organization, that's how it started. It is a case of it had to go on test nets. It had to go, and I talk to vendors and they are shocked when I tell them, but I go and say, you know what, you're not paying for the data, we are, right? So every kilobit counts, right? It's pennies or whatever, right? And to get as granular as to say, okay, to authenticate to your whatever MDM or whatever, it costs me 300 kilobits. Right. And then to say, well, if I do that 3,000 times, right, that's a lot of data. Right. And then now that's a cost my organization through infrastructure has to incur. Right. Thinking that way and having those strategies in place, it's very important for adoption in business or in enterprise. And it's sort of it's a unique problem when we look at work in our places, right, that it's not an arcade, right? This is a tool that's supposed to be productive and create money. And, when you look at new technology, anytime you're innovating, right, it has to be adopted, it has to be integrated in a certain way. Certain organizations have process and procedures. I work at UPS. We love our process and procedures. And, but unfortunately, the technology has to go through those to be adopted. But the reason why they're there is because of prior experiences. There's a reason why you're doing that. And it's because something was assumed and something went really, really bad. And then it cost the business lots of money. And they're trying to avert risk, right? So, that would be my thing. And then I think, Scott, in the case of you're saying, right, maybe it was a case of when they first initially as a business took on mobile devices, right? Those mobile devices jammed up, internal systems. And that's the justification for why, I don't know if we want to do that. Right. And it's a case of having discussion, having the educational meetings, gaining that confidence and going through it.
It's interesting.
I think one person can't do that.
Right. No. And, it's funny because I was just having this conversation with some of the guys on my team at work about how we love the technology, but sometimes it's so not about the technology. It's so about educating and having conversations and calming some people's, fears down and just having discussions. We end up doing a lot more than just representing, being technologists. We have to be therapists and teachers and counselors and listeners and with stakeholders. And I enjoy it, but I think not a lot of people, some people don't have a lot of patience for that in technology, right? And I think those of us who have been around in technology for a while know that. And I tell my kids, right, it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you don't get along with people and people don't enjoy working with you and you can't explain what you do in simple terms, they're going to run you out of there on rails, So you got to be able to get along with people and talk about business things, the business side of it, right?
Yep.
So, Mark, my last question here for you, and this is a dangerous question, so feel free to sidestep it if you need to. If you had to predict like a year out, like what do you think is going to be the thing that is important to us, and then if you had to predict like 10 years out, where do you think we're going to be?
Oh, you're going a 10-year question, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm like
now you sound now that's a VC question I get a lot, actually.
I love the Hail Mary questions where you just see what people think, because none of us are going to be right. So let's all caveat that right now. Mark,
sure.
But YouTube will still be here in 10 years, so we'll be able to look back on this.
Sure. Yeah, I hope so. For YouTube. So short term, within the next year, I think in the next year, you're definitely going to see the VR device become a mixed reality device. So pass through, things like that. I'll easily put money down on that because from a hardware vendor standpoint, there's a big market. Is it going to be successful? Who knows? Because as hardware goes, it's about the experience in the mix, and what at that moment the consumer is into. So I hope we see, and it's fairly possible, adaptive AR glasses. I think realistically, kind of, I hate to say it, but going down the road of like the Gear VR, right? The adoption, the acceptance of technology through sort of the adaptive approach initially, I'm predicting within year or two is going to be kind of a thing. We do have currently vendors out there that are doing that. And then of course people are speculating about Apple, but anyway, so within a year or two, I kind of see that it's sort of the transitional piece. Things like the metaverse, things of that nature, in regards to the metaverse being a multi-user economic system, I have very negative outlook on that, because I go back to I'm an enterprise and I really don't care about it until it impacts my business. So I generally think maybe there's going to be some contraction, things like that. Connectivity, the decentralization factors of business, things like that, they will lead to some similar or future innovation in 5 to 10 years for businesses. And I think people at Microsoft and the larger sort of gaming multi-user service companies will agree with my statement versus something like the metaverse. So I foresee 5 to 10 years a solution, because I don't see the 9 to 5 office worker being a continuous thing, just because from money it makes sense not to. I foresee real estate in corporate facilities being a thing in the next 3 years, because more and more businesses have to face the fact that the trend right now is decentralized, right? People are quitting because they don't want to do 9 to 5, right? So I see technology platforms going in that direction, right? Connectivity, increased value, stability, trust in XR devices is increasing. My hopes is within 5 years, we're definitely going to have some sort of AR, mixed reality device that is close to where we are right now with all-in-one VR headsets in 5 years. In 10 years, who knows? Maybe, cockroaches decide to take over the world, and we'll be working for them. But but hopefully there's no wars. There's nothing that happens that decelerates rapidly how we're moving, and ideally, there's that new internet for platform, whatever you want to call it, out there with cryptocurrencies and everything else, which by the way, crypto's going down right now. This might be a good buy. But and the idea of like blockchain, things of that nature, right? The co-mingled product solution, in hopefully 10 years, maybe we have something that's a little bit more solid and a little bit more accepted, across the board. And hopefully we don't get a VRML scenario where, it's an HTML version of the metaverse that never happens. So,
man, I think it's great to just be able to sit and talk to you, Mark. I know I've seen you around. You and I have been on a panel or two, and it's just good to be able to talk. Dan and I place a real high value on having having colleagues and kind of peers like yourself that we can sit and talk to, and if there's anything that we can ever do to be of value to you, please let us know, because this has been great for me.
Yeah, no problem. And also to anyone that's watching this, outside of my day job, I've been a constant evangelist of this passion that we all have. So it's something where, I'm always happy to, sit down with a young entrepreneur, and talk to them about their ideas and help them vet to maybe the venture capitalist that's sitting right now watching your show and they're saying, oh my God, why couldn't I get this guy, to vet something?
Yeah.
I've been there. I've been on both sides of the table. So, I want to see this technology grow and I want to see the community, be successful. So right back at you. If there's anything I can do to help you guys, I'm here.
Sounds. Hey, Mark, I know you're a member of a couple organizations as well. I wanted to take a moment to give you a plug.
Oh, sure. I think Chris from VRAR Association would love the fact. I co-chair the Enterprise Forum, which, is where Scott, I think, Dane, you've shown up once or twice too. I co-chair the VR AR Association's Forum for Enterprise. We're also doing an event next month. I'll be doing a talk about onboarding, perspective from large corporation to a solutions provider. So that might be interesting. And also, I tend to lurk on the XR Association as well. So, always around. I tend to be a quiet person and I tend to like to listen because I don't think I have the answers. I just have lots of problems I'm trying to solve. So, that would be my other thing is, if people see me in, a conference or whatever, feel free to come over. It's all good.
Well, we're proud to have you in the community. Yeah.
Yeah. Will you be at any of the upcoming conferences like AES or any of those?
I usually try to go to, the less popular ones. So what used to be SIGGRAPH or GC conference. I used to go to the Enterprise Wearable Conference. Currently, my organization that I'm with, unless it's business critical, we're not traveling. Gotcha. Maybe in my hopes is that that's going to change. If it's a virtual event, I usually try to go to it, between my meetings and in interviews and things like that. So, I try to, for me, one of the things I've been doing like the last 2 years is really trying to get the word out more and be less of hey, there's this guy, Mark, he's a cheat code. Go talk to him, So I'm going to try to be at more conferences, but I think in the current situation, I'm limited because our business travel is contained.
Gotcha.
Well, we do appreciate you being so approachable, Mark. It's great. Some guys are not as approachable as you are, and you've certainly been an asset to the XR community. Thank you.
Thank
Mark,
you.
We'll have to get an address for you, and we'll send you a sticker. That way you can slap it on your laptop.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I was going to say I'll throw it on the laptop there. Great.
Need you to rep the podcast. Thank you, guys. Everyone, we want to thank Mark today for his time. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube here. Give us a like on the video. Hit subscribe. If you turn on notifications, you can find out we're going live on these things now these days. And then we do record them for later consumption. So thanks again. We hope everybody has a great day. Thanks again, Mark.
Take care. Thank you.